say that this type of information should strengthen every Muslim and those who come to the nation seeking a greater understanding. This type of lecture should also help you. We live in a time in the world that there's madness on the planet itself. There's the Pope in England leaving the night or left this morning and on his way to Argentina. There's the president, he's running to Europe now trying to cement his relationship with his allies and to show that he backed England. And even though it's a very tight position, but it's our white brother, and plus, we have a historical bond, so I backed you in Argentina, even though it may hurt me in the long run. There's the crisis in the Middle East, that is the ongoing saga of Israel being protected and helped by the United States government in the middle of the Arab world. There's the divisions of the countries in Africa fighting and warring with each other and with themselves over what kind of government will be the best suited for the people. And the general condition of the planet is very bad. There's the problem of the black man in America, who is now standing on the pit of disaster in terms of unemployment, and then the war machine, or war being the big employer of thousands and maybe into the millions of black youth throughout the country. So the world is generally in trouble. Then in the midst of America, there's the black leadership with groups or organizations or whatever they call them, clubs or even gangs, that say that they represent the sentiment of the people. And in the midst of that, there's an Islamic movement. And within the framework of the Islamic movements in America, there's a whole lot of different Muslim groups. And if one hears the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and should go into the streets of Chicago or any other metropolitan city in America, they would encounter someone else who is a Muslim but has a different persuasion of Islam. And the same madness and confusion that existed around the Christian church and it exists today around the Christian church is the same confusion that you find in the streets when it comes to the teachings of Islam. The difference is you can find a man that knows absolutely nothing about the religion of Islam or the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in 1982, and where you run into a Christian, he'll know something about Jesus and the church. So when we stand up for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and those brothers and sisters who have knocked around to different groups and opened their ears to different people talking, there's always been the problem of what does the Honorable Elijah Muhammad stand for? What does he teach? How does it differ from this Islam or that Islam? Today at the office, I got a call from a white man out in the suburbs of Chicago, Poland or something, Harlan, or I can't think of the name. What was the name of it? Poland, yeah, I guess that was the name of the little town outside, and he wanted to find someone that would come out and lecture on Islam to give his students and pupils a clear understanding of these Islamic movements, and he said especially this fundamentalist Islamic movement that we hear so much about in the Middle East. And so when I listened to him, I said, well, you call the Nation of Islam, and we're black Muslims. He said, oh. He went to saying, well, could you help me to find what I want? Showing you that I'm a Muslim, but he didn't want me to come. He didn't want our explanation. He was trying to find some other kind of Muslim. And so being that I figured he was a white Christian, and he said, I wanted to know something about all of these different schisms. See, when you use the word schism, it automatically means something that is divided, and no one is attracted to that has a lot of schisms. So when he used that word, I turned it around on him and showed him the Christian church. I said, just like if you would go out here and try to find out what's the difference between Bible Way Baptist Church and this one right here next to it, and you try to decipher, well, how did this church start and what group are you related to, your head would be twisted like a pretzel, because you couldn't get to the bottom of all of the madness that exists in those divisions. And the same thing if one says that I'm a communist or a Marxist, then I would say, well, do you belong to the Young Socialists? Do you belong to the CPA? Do you belong to the Young Spartans? Do you belong to the Communist Revolutionary Party? Do you belong to the Black Marxists? I mean, they're split up and divided like that. And what the devil, who is the white man, what he understands is that there may be groups and people who oppose my system or my way, but if I can keep them divided in their own beliefs, then I can maintain my position of power over them, because I'm united on one thing, and I'm united on the fact that I must fight to keep the white man in power and keep all of my brothers, though we argue and fight with each other, we are united on the fact that we must keep our foot on the black man's neck, and that we must never let them rise up as a united power, that they could upset our position or put us out of our position of power over them. So the same problem that exists also in the world of Islam. But when it comes to the black man in America, the one voice that stands out clearly, that set the spark off in America to make black people even consider the religion of Islam, is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That's crystal clear. Now, those brothers who felt that they have outgrown the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teaching, that they in their Islamic knowledge, that they have moved beyond the point of what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught, should learn the number one lesson, that the number one student of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad for 12 years, who was Malcolm X, thought also that he had outgrown the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he had not even begun to catch up with the messenger, and he found that out when he got out there into the big leagues, because he was in the minor leagues as long as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was controlling the ball field. But when he thought that he didn't have to be in that league and that he was ready for the big leagues, meaning that he could get out there and deal on the international scene with other so-called black leaders and the devils, and he left the ball field that the messenger told him to stay in, he found out it was a different ball game altogether out there, and it ended up causing his death. Now, so as I do this part 2 on the history of the Nation of Islam, and I know that we have brothers and sisters in front of me who love Malcolm because of what you have heard of Malcolm, not because of what you know of him, because you know only what the white man painted of him in the description that he gave. And as I give my talk, I don't want you to feel that I got a session that I'm whipping on Malcolm, but I want to show you as Malcolm as a lesson for all of us. And when I say all of us, that's Muslim and non-Muslim. Because if you begin to walk with a man, and he brought you from nothing and made you something, and he showed you that he had the wisdom to guide you and bring you out of that condition, and because he gave you power and gave you the ability really to articulate, and by that somebody will say, no, he was born with the ability, but if he didn't have nothing to say, he couldn't articulate. Because the worst sound in the ears of Allah is the braying of asses. So says the Holy Quran. Now, I don't want you to feel that I'm calling anyone other than themselves. But that's the language that the Holy Quran uses. And meaning that you could make a loud noise, but if you ain't saying nothing, you're not making nothing but noise. Meaning that if I had the ability, if I was a rapper like these brothers on Rappers Delight, and if ain't nothing in what they saying, I'm just running my mouth. That's all. And I'm tickling the fancy of somebody's ears that love to hear a mouth rattle. But if you got something to say, then you really become articulate. So if Malcolm had nothing to say before he heard the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, then he was just somebody blowing in the breeze. And he had nothing to say until the messenger taught him. So I'm just going to do a quick recap, one of those instant recaps. We talked about 2 weeks ago on part 1 of the history of the Nation of Islam. We talked about the birth of Master Farad Muhammad. We talked about his coming in and out of America for 20 years before he stood to make his mission known. And we talked about him studying for this mission for 42 years. He began to teach in Detroit. We talked about the depression that set in, the stock market crashed. And when the stock market crashed, many banks folded. White folks were committing suicide, jumping off buildings, in New York in particular. And during this dark hour in America, that's when the Savior stood up and began to teach. I think I gave the parallel of that of Mary and Jesus, and how Mary became pregnant. In a dark hour when her father went away to tend to some business, she was left alone and a dust storm came up, and she thought on the man, the only man she ever loved, which was Joseph. And Joseph had moved somewhere else and had married another woman, but he came back to her through this call she made to him, and they got together in those 3 nights, and she became pregnant with the child Jesus. Now, all of that in the scripture represents something here of the cry of black people who had suffered in America. And under a very dark hour, when we were out of work and there were bread lines, our calling, the Savior came and answered that call, and he impregnated us, or impregnated the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in particular, with this truth that he carried. So the messenger, as I went over the history and I gave more detail that I won't give this time, just bringing you up to date. He studied under the Savior for 3.5 years. The Savior left him, and he told the people to hear Elijah. And the messenger's first name, they called him, was Elijah Kareem, and then later it became Elijah Muhammad. The messenger had to fight to establish his position because he was not accepted, because there were those who felt that they were more qualified than him, and showing you that how vanity can divide up a community. Because if I think I should be the boss, then I can't listen to no one else. And I never consider the people who are seeking light and salvation, if I consider them, then even if I think that I'm better and I know that this man is doing the job, then whatever I am, it will come to the surface. You know, when you get a good bottle of milk, they're not like that anymore, but you can shake them up. But when you set it down, the cream always rises to the top. So if you are the cream, you never have to fight for the position. When things settle down, you're going to rise to the top anyway, because that's where you belong. So if you try to make yourself that, if you say, I should be heard, I should be the #1 nigga, I'm the baddest one around here. See, you fighting and trying to force yourself into a position, and you usually get crushed. So the messenger was given to the people, but there were those who felt more qualified. So they divided up the community because they wanted to be heard themselves. But in the long run, none of them, you don't know the name of one of them. I know it just by studying it. Theodore Roosevelt and Abdullah Muhammad, how they rose up against the messenger. They wanted to wave the American flag, and they thought that he was doing it wrong and that they could do it much better than him, and those that wanted to take his life. But in the end, the messenger rose completely to the top. And I remember in the early 60s, he even sent some money to one of them who had lent him some money back in the 30s. He had a brother to search him out, find him, and repay the debt, but they were never heard of. But the messenger was on top of it all, showing you that he was the one. And after all of the things settled down, the cream rose to the top. So the messenger had to go on the run. And as I said, not running because he feared for his life, but he was really running to save their lives and to preserve the message that he had. In 1942, he was arrested in Washington, D.C. He went to a federal penitentiary for the Selective Service Act, the draft, and they felt that they had to keep him from talking to black people during the time that they were pursuing a war in the Pacific and also in Germany. He came out of jail in 46. He didn't stay in Detroit. He came here to Chicago, set up a temple. He would go back and forth to Detroit teaching. He worked hard, and during the early 50s, 1952, and I want you to remember this, Malcolm came out of jail. And I want you to look at this because the history, the part that we're covering is from 1960 to 1980, a 20-year period of the Nation of Islam. And as the messenger worked to rebuild a nation, which he had to do after coming out of prison because the nation had fallen. And whenever you lack a strong man at the center to encourage men, to keep men going, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't care how old you think you are. Men draw strength from men. The same thing with women. If you got a good, strong, moral individual who is always concerned with giving you the lessons that they have learned in life so that you will not stumble over things that they have stumbled over, then you don't become proud. Say, I don't need to listen to nobody. I'm my own boss. You draw strength from other individuals. And God made it that way. That's why in the Arabic language, as I heard Brother Farrakhan say very beautifully, that the word for man is insan, and the Arabic root word to that means a social being. Meaning that man is made for man. You were not made to be a hermit, a monk, someone who lives in total isolation and I don't need no one else. But you're a social being, meaning that you need the interaction between brothers and sisters and sisters and sisters and brothers and brothers. And this helps your own growth and development. You know, if the brothers who are butchers, you know how you use a steel to true the edge of a blade? The steel doesn't really sharpen the knife, but it brings the edge back that was lost through the continuous cutting. I got a brother out here that's a butcher. I used to be a butcher. So you have a steel. It's a round piece of straight steel, and you see the butcher run his knife on it. Okay, sometimes you call it a sharpener. But it's really not a sharpener. The sharpener is the little flintstone that you put the edge on the knife, but the steel trues the edge because after continuous cutting, the edge begins to go to one side or the other, and you just bring the edge right back by hitting it on your steel. And the lesson is that steel sharpens steel. Man sharpens man. Another woman can sharpen you. Your interaction, your conversation with them and talking to them, it helps to develop and sharpen your own wits. And that's how the messenger was able to get to every one of us. He first helped him in Detroit. And Malcolm being a young man, and he looked at the temple, it made me come in the temple and he'd see the few people that are in this auditorium now. He was not satisfied with that. He felt that this truth was so bad that every nigga out there ought to hear this, and he ought to be right in here instead of on the corner. So he would round the brothers out, and they would go out in the street, and they would exchange wits with the brother and talk to the brother on the corner, because see, most brothers sometimes look at brothers with a white shirt and a bow tie as church boys, you understand? And that they so hip and into it, what they into in the street, and we ain't nothing but chumps or either faggots, and you don't want to be involved in that. So you had to go out there and tell him that he was the chump, and that the white man had him out there drinking the liquor. The white man had him acting a clown and looking like a fool, and the white man had his mind. He had no knowledge of himself. He was dead to the knowledge of himself, and he needed to be resurrected. And that we were going to bring him to Islam and bring him out of that sick condition because he was in the grave. So when the brother heard that, and then when he came into a temple setting and heard all of this fire, and heard the brother teaching that the white man was the devil and Allah was about to destroy America, and you had to get your act together, then this helped to bring brothers towards Islam. And as I said on Sunday, then the yardstick for the manhood among the brothers was not the reefer, the liquor, the women, the streets, the pipes and the pistols and the knives, but it became the yardstick of manhood became, can I be in the midst of the filth and all of this that white America has put on me, and can I push it to the side and say I'm going to live a clean life? That became the real strength. That was the peer group pressure when we joined Islam. It was number one, can you hold your family together? Can you hold a job down? And can you stay away from the filth of the world? So in the brotherhood, I had to meet up to my brother and to show him that I had given up the world of the white man. And I had come into the knowledge that Allah's messenger had given us, who was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he had given me a knowledge that that was the world of the white man, and I had to clean up from that world, because the only real devil on the planet was that two-legged, blue-eyed white man who was ruling the planet itself. So that gave me the strength to say that if I'm involved in what the white man has taught me, then I'm a disciple of the devil, and I want to be a disciple of God, okay? So Malcolm went out in the street and he fished, and he was good. So the messenger brought him into Chicago, and the messenger said it was only 2 ministers that he taught the way he taught, Malcolm and Wallace. He taught those 2 brothers personally, gave them certain things, told them things that he told no one else. And he said that, and after Malcolm defected from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the messenger said he would never teach a minister like he taught Wallace and Malcolm. And the reason for that is because everything that he taught them, they turned around and used it on the man who was their benefactor, the one who brought them up. Wallace was born a Muslim. taken care of by his father, but yet and still he turned on his father. Malcolm was educated by the messenger, taken care of by the messenger, groomed by the messenger, made into the man that the world gave respect to. Then he turned on his leader. Now let's look at the roots of that. So in 1952, Malcolm comes out. The nation is struggling to get off the ground. There's only a few followers. The messenger is teaching himself with a few ministers that he's training. Remember, these brothers all had to be trained. So as the messenger is working in the early 60s, in 1 year before this, let's take this period, 1954, there's another minister for the messenger in New York, Sultan Muhammad. They called him Sultan Muhammad. And he was a very powerful and good speaker. And he had a problem. His problem was that his wife was in disagreement with the messenger. And he had to make a decision. And Sultan Muhammad made a decision to go with his wife and leave the messenger. That's a hell of a thing. Now somebody may say, but you don't know what the affairs of the heart do. See? You be in love with one of these sisters in your nose, she got a ring in your nose and kind of pulling you around, and then when it comes to your God or that woman, then you got to look at it and try to rationalize what you're going to do. See, that's when it becomes a real test. Some brothers say, I know what I would do. You don't know a damn thing until it happens to you. So you can't measure what you do until you're in that position. Anyway, Sultan Muhammad, who was like then the national representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, made a decision and he fell. And it's very critical because the brother was a very powerful speaker. And when he died in North Carolina, back in the early 70s, he had lost his voice totally. His voice had just gone, okay? Showing you that God will gift you with something that you can put into the service of God. And if you go away and don't use it, God takes it from you. And I'm telling you, the lessons, the knowledge of the lessons that we had as followers of the messenger, when people stopped using and referring to those lessons, they almost went out of some of their minds. You know, and the very things that were in the lesson, can the devil fool a Muslim? You say, no, not nowadays. And devil was knocking us off left and right, deceiving us and everything else, because the very lessons that we were given, we didn't put them to use, and so God just took it away from us totally. So when he fell, Malcolm was working in Detroit, and he was in New York. So the messenger sent Malcolm to New York. So Malcolm began to teach in New York. New York was temple number 7. And the messenger, when we dedicated our new temple there in 1969, and he sent the tape for Brother Farrakhan before he spoke that Sunday afternoon, the messenger said it was no accident that New York is temple number 7. New York was called the Mecca of Black America because there were more black people living there than anywhere else. And 7 is the number of perfection. And 7, some people say, and I've never heard a messenger teach on it, and so don't say that this is the messenger's teaching. But people say that Shabazz is rooted in 7. And that out of the tribes, this is what they say, like Sabbath, Shabbat, Shabazz, okay? And when the devils tried to check out the word Shabazz, I remember in the early 60s, they were trying to see the root of it. And because when they looked in the Arab world, the Muslims couldn't deal with it, because they just don't have that name. And so the only place they found a little town in Central Asia, in the area of Russia where there's Muslims in southern Russia, they found a little town, or a little village with the same spelling, Shabazz, okay? But otherwise, they had never heard the name and nobody really knows the meaning of it. But temple number 7 was like the standard bearer of the Nation of Islam. So Malcolm began to speak in temple number 7, and he worked hard in there. Now I want you to keep these figures in mind, don't lose me on them, okay? So 54 he started working. So Malcolm works. 5 years later, 1959, Malcolm is really rocking the city, teaching the messenger's teaching. So Mike Wallace, the same cracker you see on 60 Minutes, he got together with Louis Lomax, who was a Negro reporter that was trying to get into the big times, you know. He was trying to make it. And Louis Lomax, he was one of those that understood the way you make it is you do what the white folks can't do and you bring it back and present it to them, and then they give you a little promotion. That's what they'll send you out. You know how the white man got Indian scouts? and he got the Indian scouts, and he would send them out, and they would go among the other Indians that he was fighting against, and they would get information and bring it back to the boss, and he would give them another raise, either some more liquor, give him a new horse, you understand? You know how you do when you clean his house, sister, you give you an old pair of shoes, give you an old coat that's worn out or something like that. Well, he's always had that same kind of game. So he gives them, and when it comes to areas of professionalism, what he does is he gives you a little promotion if you go out and get the information he cannot get. So Mike Wallace used Louis Lomax. And Louis Lomax went and approached Malcolm in New York and asked him to make a piece for television that was called, and the brothers who have access to these college library film stacks, you can get this film and it'll be very interesting. I know the University of Chicago has it, okay? And you go and you get the film, you can look at it. It's called The Hate That Hate Produced. And the messenger was interviewed on this film, but this film was shown all over America. And it was designed to be a film to turn black people off from the Nation of Islam because our message was so powerful, okay? So they used things such as brainwashing, that the Muslim brainwash those that listen. And then Malcolm would turn around and say, that's exactly what niggas need. They need their brains washed out from this white madness that they've been poisoned with for all of these years. So it was a battle now going on for the minds of our people, and the devil had access to the media. And by having access to the media, he had access to your mind that we couldn't get to you. We had to try to get to you on the street corner, or when you got locked up and went to prison, and you ain't had nothing else to listen to, then we could get to you in jail because you was open for a little bit of everything at that time. But the point was that he had access to the media, and he began to describe us to the world, and he described us as a hate group. They described us as the Klan in reverse. So during this time, when we came to national attention in 1959, we came to national attention as the reverse of the Ku Klux Klan, okay, as a hate group, a group of Muslims who believed in this self-made prophet Elijah Muhammad. And they were full of ex-thugs and ex-prostitutes and gangsters. And so therefore, black people looked at us as some kind of thugs. But all of this was designed to try to turn the people off, because evidently the white folks saw that the impact of Islam on black people would be tremendous unless they put out something to counter it. Now, I will be frank with you that, you know, when you hear Brother Farrakhan speak, whether you agree with him or disagree, you know that it's the most powerful message you have ever heard. You understand? I mean, you got to bear witness, and what's coming out the brother's mouth from the messenger, you haven't heard anything like it, nor will you go out in the world and hear anything to match it. You can listen to sheikhs, mullahs, qadis, imams, whatever you have that teach Islam. None teach Islam like the Nation of Islam, and none of it has the effect on black people as the teaching of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Look. So, all praise to Allah. All praise to Allah. So let's go on. So 59 comes in. This is produced across the country. At the same time, now I don't know if it's the Ford Foundation, but a foundation, maybe Lilly or Ford or one of them, gave Dr. Eric C. Lincoln, gave him a grant to write, Eric Lincoln, to write a book, a study on the black Muslims in America. Now this is 1960. 59, they do a TV show. 1960, they do a book, okay? And the book is called Black Muslims in America. And the book at that time in 1960, all of us wanted to be called Negroes. No one wanted to be black. And so black was supposed to be something dejected, something terrible. So the book was written at that time also to heighten the thing that the Muslims were only a product of the American oppression of black people, and if America eased up, then you wouldn't have such thing as a Muslim. See, there was nothing at the root of it to say that this was the work of God, that God now had intervened with a whole nation of people who were dragged out of Africa, put in the holds of slave ships, and brought into the bowels of America and abused for 400 years. See, they didn't analyze it like that. And that now that America had become the most wealthiest, the most powerful nation on the planet, that now God comes to that nation that is on top, that has reached her zenith, and she goes down into the bowels of that government and finds these slaves who have served that government and now is going to bring that government down and bring these slaves to the top. So therefore, what takes place is that they never analyze it like that. They just say that we represented a product of the mistreatment in America, some disgruntled black people who were misguided by this self-made prophet Elijah Muhammad. This is the book. This is the revised edition, I believe, and he would have to keep on revising it, yes, because the Nation of Islam is like a flower that is in bloom. We just went through a terrible winter under Wallace Muhammad, okay? And now that winter is over, we're coming back into bloom, and he proved in those years that he tried to take the nation in a different direction, that it did not have the mass appeal to awaken, to stimulate, to motivate, to organize our people and move them in a proper direction. So when Eric Lincoln in '72 revised the book that he wrote back in 1960, the revised edition, he was trying to bring it up to date on what the Muslims represented. But in Eric Lincoln's book, in 1960, the source material that he used was Erdman Binyard's The Voodoo Cults in America from the American Journal of Sociology, May of 1938. And in this, Erdman Binyard, who was a Jew that attended the University of Chicago, and for his thesis, for his PhD in sociology, he did a research on this, what they call voodoo cult now. This is how they described it. And the reason that we got that name is because one of our misguided brothers felt that these Christian Negroes were so savage that he had to kill one. So he killed the brother, and so they used that as the base of a study on us to try to say that we were all out of it. But if you read the documentation which is available, you can go to the University of Chicago and read it. This was written in May of 1938, 4 years after Master Farad Muhammad left. Even Erdman Binyard had to say that the effects of this teaching from this Master Farad Muhammad, who he described in the book himself, that when they questioned him, when they arrested the Savior, they asked him who he was. He said, the supreme ruler of the universe. And he put that right in the book. But he shows how it made us a different people from the average Negro. Even though we were in the community, we were like apart from the community. And he had to analyze it very clearly, that evidently this teaching of Islam from Master Farad Muhammad made a radical change among black people, unlike any other religious movement in America that spread among black people. So now Eric Lincoln does this research. He puts the book out. They give it high visibility. At the same time, another student here in Chicago, an African named, what's the African name that wrote Black Nationalism? Udom, E.S. Udom. He wrote a book. Now that was for his thesis. And I don't have time to do it tonight, but you get you a history book. You can get Africa's Gift to America, and then you can get one of Bennett's books, Lerone Bennett's books. But you analyze that every 20 years there seems to be a rise, and then a lull of consciousness, a rise, and it goes up and down like a wave. Now they analyzed it. So they knew that the 60s represented a period of consciousness among black people, and their thought or their desire was to control it. But the difference at this period of time is that God's messenger was on the scene, and the religion of Islam was being taught to black people in America on a wide level. And what they wanted to do was to discredit the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. So they wanted to discredit us, as it says in the COINTEL report, among responsible black people, or Negroes as they call them, so that the intellects among our people, black people, who had been trained by the white man in his schools of learning, would not bring that expertise to the Nation of Islam, because they felt to come to the Nation of Islam means to come to an organized group of thugs, you understand, who's talking about destroying the American government. In the early 60s, when I first came to Islam, they had a crescent, a blackboard. They had a national on the blackboard. And we were so dead that we thought it was the Russian Hammond signal that they were teaching communism. And white folks had already programmed us since the early 50s during the McCarthy period that anything that is adverse to the American government or anybody talking against the madness of this society must be a communist, and the communist in our mind was some dark monster somewhere, so we felt that the Nation of Islam with this crescent and star must be akin to these communists, and they had to be wrong. We were programmed to think that America was all right, and that always that the good guy on a white horse with two pistols and a white hat came just as the Indian was about to kill the good guy. This is the way we were programmed. So we were programmed to think that America never lost a war, and that everything in America was all right. And when you saw the flag waving, that this is the American spirit, this is the way Negroes thought. You understand? When you pledged allegiance in the morning, or your little child was in school pledging allegiance to the American flag, you never gave it a second thought. Why should I have my daughter or my son pledging to a flag that they have suffered under since we've been here in America? Well, you know, one God. Look, right. One God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A hell of a lie. But you got your little children and didn't have the strength, the guts, nor the knowledge to say, look, when you go to school, you don't pledge to nothing. You tell them it's against your religious belief to pledge to that flag. And so when they stand, you just stand there and put your hands at your side, but don't pledge nothing. And you can tell them that if you had the strength to do it, they couldn't say nothing about it. But we were so weak and spineless and boneless with no direction that we just put our children right into it. Look. So 1960, they're making the Nation of Islam appear as a hate group. The messenger starts traveling all around the country. And in May of 59, when he went to Washington, D.C., this upset the government of America, even though Eisenhower sent a motorcade to escort the messenger to the arena there in Washington. It upset the government because he was a man that wasn't singing the blues or anything else, but he attracted over 10,000 black people, and hardly nobody who were on the higher echelons in the government even knew who he was. You understand? I mean, they looked up one day and there were 10,000 people, but the FBI had been watching them since the early 30s, and they knew what they were dealing with. So in comes Kennedy in 1960. Kennedy being suave, astute, young, smart. He looked at the mass unemployment among black youth, and he saw them in the streets smoking reefer and talking stuff. And at the same time, the civil rights movement was starting up. So therefore, Kennedy began to set up programs that he could control the black youth of America. Number one program was Job Corps. Number two was the influx of a tremendous amount of reefer into the black community, okay? And from the reefer in the major cities, it went right to heroin, because whoever is drugged can be controlled, okay? And he knows because he drugged the whole nation, China. I mean, he got everybody in China high off opium, then he ran China. And it wasn't until the Chinese got together and said that we must stop it ourselves that they were able to get opium out of China, and then didn't really get rid of it until Mao took over in 1949. But the American government realized that you didn't have nothing to do. And if he could keep you fighting and killing your brother and breaking into an old lady's house and robbing her television when she's scrubbing some white woman's floor downtown or up on the north side, or to keep you in the community fighting with each other over a bag of dope or over some loose woman, then he could control you as long as he kept that inner thing. He made the black inner like a playpen. That's right. You understand? And in the playpen, he let you come out from 9 to 5 to go downtown and work for him, and then in the evening you come back. And in the playpen, he had to put things to entertain you, like a bar on every corner, like somebody that always got some good dope for you to use, okay? But all kind of madness to entertain you. And every now and then he makes a superstar, like a James Brown or Stevie Wonder. He brings them into your community to keep you partying and to keep your head bad. As long as your head was bad, he knew that he could rule over you. He wasn't drunk when he brought you in this condition, and you won't be drunk in order to get out of it. Look at it now.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Hit that like and subscribe button for me. Enjoy the video. Thank you.
So in the 1960s, they saw this rise, Kennedy in particular. He saw the Nation of Islam teaching separation, a black nationalist movement in essence, okay? And they saw, we don't say that we're black nationalists because we're universal. The universe belongs to the black man, you know, no particular land mass. But he saw also that they had to have an opposing force And what represented that was the integrationist civil rights movement. Good brothers like Martin Luther King, who loved white folks, who felt that they were human beings like all other white folks, and that he could embrace them, and that he could show them that we could outlast their ability to inflict harm on us with our ability to show love to them. See, and that represented the proper balance to them, so therefore they could have the two opposing forces at one end, one organized, one unorganized, but given the appearance of being organized because they had media on their side. And the media painted the picture of them engaged in a struggle that they could get all black folks involved in marching and demonstrating. And meanwhile, on the other end were those Muslims and those who Muslims produce. What do I mean by that? Meaning like the Black Panther Party, the Revolutionary Action Movement, and all of your revolutionary groups actually came from the strength of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The Panther brother said, if the messenger can call him a devil, I can call him a pig. You understand? If the messenger can talk about God wants to burn America, I can start tomorrow and burn down the block around the corner. So therefore, what they felt that they were doing is they could do what the messenger was saying without being in the framework of the messenger's teaching. So in the midst of this, Malcolm getting visibility, getting press coverage, people hear the name Malcolm X. Malcolm was an excellent student of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he worked faithfully, brought many people in. I mean, I'm in the nation as a part of Malcolm's work out of New York. And Brother Farrakhan is a Muslim because Malcolm heard about his ability and pointed out the brother to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad right here in Chicago when he first attended his first meeting. So Malcolm worked good while he was good. And he helped the nation. Yes, he did start the first Mr. Muhammad Speaks in New York in 1959, our first paper. And he kept the paper there going, working out of his basement in our little office, Mr. Muhammad Speaks, until October of 1961 when the messenger himself brought the paper to Chicago. So Malcolm was working out. The messenger had a student that he was grooming, and he would tell him what to do and what not to do. Malcolm would make mistakes and slip, and I would say this to brothers and sisters. See, we're going to make mistakes. And when you make a mistake and somebody corrects you, that helps you. But whenever you feel that you don't want to be corrected, and in your mind when somebody tells you that you've done something wrong and you try to justify your action because you feel you're too grown for somebody to tell you that you're wrong, then that's when you stop growing. That's when you stagnate right at that level. Because you don't want, see, if somebody, even if you think you're right, but somebody got another view on what you're talking about or what you're doing, but you don't have the patience to listen to them or to analyze what they're saying because you feel that you know what you're doing and you don't need nobody to tell you nothing, then you stagnate right at that level. That's right. So Malcolm was one who corrected, but he knew how to take correction to a point until the devils really blew him out of proportion. Now I'm going to go over this part, and it's going to take a little while, and you know, hold your peace. I know those of you who love Malcolm and think that, you know, that the messenger threw Malcolm out, or Malcolm knew something about the personal life of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and that's why he had to leave the nation and all of that. No, you just don't understand. And I hope by the help of Allah that I can explain what I know to you, and it will help you as you begin to look at the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So, okay, Malcolm is working. This is the early 60s now. 1961, the messenger comes to New York to the Army. 1960 and 61. He went to Philly. He was in Pittsburgh. He went to Boston, but he was moving Los Angeles. That's where what the Muslims wanted, what the Muslims believed in 1962 in Los Angeles, California. The messenger issued that. It was written up. As a matter of fact, I think Lomax was flown out there. See, the white media and the white establishment had Lomax on the case. Lomax comes out with a book when the word is given, and he puts Malcolm on the cover of the book. So there's controversy inside of the nation because of our jealousy of anybody getting into the light of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Nobody should block out his light. And if we felt that a minister was being promoted to outshine the messenger, then we were always on guard because the messenger, in our opinion, should always be out front. But see, that's because really that was small thinking on our behalf. The messenger's the one that put the man out there. And what most of you don't realize is that when the book, Malcolm's book, was written, it was the messenger that they wanted to do the autobiography on. The messenger said no. He wouldn't allow him to do it, and he gave Malcolm permission to do his own autobiography so that Malcolm could show the world how he came from a cheap thug and came into Islam through the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So the messenger gave him permission to use his life to bear witness to the power of the messenger's teaching, which after his death, the autobiography was turned around to be used against the Nation of Islam. So in the early 60s, I want you to, let's see what we want to leave up here. So let's remember 1952. So Malcolm is gaining national attention. In April 27, 1962, in Los Angeles, California, the brothers were taking stuff out of their car, and the LA Police Department rolled on the brothers. And a fight broke out. Because we're not no faggots and sissies. Now, I'm telling you now. You know, and the thing about it is that if you say that my life and my death are all for Allah, then you got to mean that, but you can't turn your back and run in the next incident because you got some faggot policeman with a reckless pistol in his hand. Allah is God, and it's your time to die, you're going to die anyway. And if it's not your time to die, you're not going to die. Okay? So these brothers, and the reason that I'm bringing this date up now, remember, the nation gets national attention, and the brothers who love to do research, and especially the brothers who are just coming into Islam, this history that I'm going over tonight is good for you, and I'm saying it, but you can go and look it up. And it takes some time, but then you're armed, because when you say that I believe in the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and I accept the religion of Islam, you're going to run into every kind of Muslim you can think of out there. And most of them that have got a foot in the white man's world and a foot in the Islam, they down the messenger because the messenger say you got to be 100%. 99 and 9/10 won't make it. But you want to put out there in the white man's world. Every now and then you want to joint the smoke. Every now and then you want a little sister you can run down somewhere. You want to keep one foot. And you can tell because they got a foot in the world and a foot in Islam. All praise is due to Allah. Be on the disco floor with affairs on their holy Quran. All praise is due to Allah. See, they got a foot in both worlds. And so therefore, and I'm telling you like it is, because the Ahmadiyya Muslims, who were some sincere Muslims, a lot of them were musicians. And they were into music, and they were smoking and using dope and doing a little bit of everything, but they knew the power of Islam. All over the country before the messenger's teaching spread among a lot of people who knew something about Islam, knew something about the Ahmadiyya Muslims. And the Ahmadiyya Muslims were mainly among musicians. They loved Islam, but they loved the world also. And they didn't have the strength to break off the world and come totally into Islam, so they had a foot in both worlds. So when they run into you as a follower of the messenger that's trying to keep a foot in the world of Islam, then they want to challenge you. I believe that Prophet Muhammad was the seal of the prophets. Do you read the Holy Quran, brother? It says in the 33rd chapter, the 40th verse, that Muhammad is not the father of any of your men. He is the seal of the prophet, the messenger of Allah. Where does Elijah Muhammad come in? See? I mean, brother, I'll wash you, I'll take you, I'll hang you out to wash with that statement. See? But the point is, it's not that Prophet Muhammad was so endeared to you. Prophet Muhammad didn't teach you Islam. Prophet Muhammad, when the Quran was revealed to him, as Kimberly told Abdulaziz in Saudi Arabia, that the Prophet Muhammad didn't even know America existed. And as far as some black slaves being brought into bondage of America and Islam would liberate them, Prophet Muhammad never even thought on that level. So how can you stand on a roster and preach Islam, and Prophet Muhammad and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad built the roster and gave you Islam, but you can't show him any gratitude for what he did? No. So let's look at it. Let's look at it. So now the devils have got the thing out that we're a hate group. So the Los Angeles Police Department, that's a reckless police department, insensitive. They ran on these brothers, the brothers fought, and one of our brothers was killed. And as history will record, that Brother Ronald died because he thought, too, that there was something humane about that devil. And he went to the devil's talking about, hold it, there's no need of this. And they shot him right down, okay? See, but when he saw his brothers fighting, the only thing to do was to get into the fight, brother. That's the only thing to do. And I'm telling you, brother, when it comes to fighting that devil, Allah is God. You understand? And you got to call on him and fight like hell, and you will get the victory, and we've seen it happen before. When your brother's out there fighting, you think you're dealing with some beast that's human? He expects niggas to cow down. When he pulls his nightstick or he corners you, he expects you to go to grabbing your head while he's kicking and hitting on you. He don't expect you to fight back. You understand? And so when you fight back, he gets nervous, and he got to go to shooting because he's a born coward. So the brother thought that there was something humane about that devil, and that he could cool the devil out, and the devil shot him and killed him. So with this killing, the devils tried to keep it quiet, but we had a national newspaper, Mr. Muhammad Speaks. So we brought a special edition out on it, and we made it, we brought national attention to it. And during that time, Malcolm was going back and forth to Los Angeles to help a minister we had there named John Shabazz. And Malcolm, you know, he was an activist, and he wanted to go to war. And so the messenger called him in and said, brother, you don't go to war because one soldier was killed. We're not prepared to go to war with the devil. I mean, the messenger had to tell him. He was hot. He wanted to take lives. You know, he wanted to get retaliation. We all wanted retaliation, but the messenger's a gentleman. He got troops in prisons throughout the country. He got brothers and sisters living all over the country, and one brother's killed. If he called war and let Malcolm being radical and ready for war to make him send the troops into the field of battle, untested, untried, and unprepared, and unarmed and ill-equipped to go up against the devil, they would wipe us out all over the country. The Panther Party, if you look at it, represents the end results of Malcolm's thinking, and the devil's wiped them out in every city. Look. That's where it's at. That's history, brother. Fred Hampton and the brother that was killed right here in Chicago is a prime example of what I'm talking about. The brothers had weapons, and they were ready to get down, and when the devil wanted, he wiped them out. He destroyed Eldridge Cleaver, and Huey Newton right now is almost a damn vegetable. You understand? His mind is shot. Eldridge Cleaver making pouch pants for men's private areas and talking about he's a damn Mormon now is out of his mind. And this is how the devil can destroy you if he wants to mess over you. No, brother, that's the big leagues. That's what I meant. Malcolm was in a ball field, and he thought he was ready to get out of that ball field into another, and went into the major leagues and got wiped out. Look, I'm just telling you like it is. Okay, look. So when this incident happened, Malcolm was going back and forth from New York to Los Angeles, and it was just at the time that I was coming into the temple. So it was a lot of tension centered around it. And all of a sudden, one day, the messenger said, Allah told Malcolm that Allah will pay him back. So a whole plane full of crackers from Georgia, okay, were over in Paris on some kind of vacation. And the plane, I think it was 76 devils from Georgia. The plane falls out of the sky in Paris. Every one of them crackers are killed. And so Malcolm is going into Los Angeles, so he gets on the roster, and he said, all praise is due to Allah. Brothers and sisters, today Allah has answered our prayers. And he told the audience, and quite naturally everybody applauded, but it wasn't a wise thing to do. What he said was true, but it was just untimely. So the messenger had to call him in. See? And that's the kind of thing you say under your breath, all praise is due to Allah, and keep stepping. But it shows you the power of your God. I mean, he killed 76 for the one of our brothers that they killed, okay? So Malcolm made that public statement, and the messenger had to call him in. This is 62. Now 63 rolls in. The first thing that happens in 1963, the Savior's Day here in Chicago, the messenger didn't make it. So Malcolm spoke that Savior's Day here in Chicago for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And when Malcolm spoke that Savior's Day, you know, I mean, Malcolm was the flower boy of the entire nation. He was what you call the chief lieutenant of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, his spokesman. And Malcolm was a spellbinder. He could speak. He could represent the messenger. So as 63 moves, the government now begins to work on the nation because they see the nation as that potential threat. And what I'm saying to you is written in millions of pages of documents on the Nation of Islam that didn't start in 57, but started back in the 30s. Actively, they got involved in documenting and following us and doing everything else in 57. The FBI would come to our house and say, did you attend one of those Muslim meetings? And Negroes, brother, in the mid-50s and early 60s, scared to death. FBI knock on the door and their knees go to check. As soon as he flashes back, And then they say, you just better stay from them meetings. And then your mother go to say, Lord, boy, what is that? Who's that? That's the FBI, Mom. What you been doing, see? And I'm telling you, that's the same fear thing that they had on the plantation. So they began to work on the nation. So after Savior's Day, the messenger was sick. And in 1962 and 63, I wish I had the copy of the Muhammad Speaks here, the messenger took a picture that he wanted to put in there. And he had lost a lot of weight. He was very thin. They had taken him to Phoenix because of his condition. And the doctors really thought that the messenger was going to die. And I remember I was in New York and I was talking to Brother William J. about it today. Malcolm came December of 63, 62. It was December 62, because Savior's Day 63, which is February, is when Malcolm spoke here in Chicago. But it was December of 62, Malcolm came home one weekend and he was speaking at the temple. As a matter of fact, that lecture that I mentioned to you that's written in White World Supremacy was the lecture he delivered at the temple right before he made the announcement that we were going to go on a 10-day fast. I thought it was a 20-day fast. We were just going into Ramadan. And Malcolm said that this Ramadan is going to be a different Ramadan. Things that we normally did in Ramadan, we were not going to do it that Ramadan, and we were going to fast for 10 days because the messenger was sick. And in Malcolm's mind, I later found out that the doctor said that the messenger would not live. We got brothers here that were in the nation at that time that will witness what I'm saying. Right. And we thought that the messenger was going to die, and Malcolm wanted everybody to fast for 10 days. So, but what it represented, now as you look back on history, is that God was trying Malcolm. Trying him because he knew that he was the heir apparent. And he knew how much the Honorable Elijah Muhammad loved him and trusted him. You understand? So if something happened to the messenger, he would step into the driver's seat automatically. But into this thing, there was Wallace Muhammad. Wallace, who had become the minister of Philadelphia, had been sent to Philadelphia in the early 60s, but then he had to go to jail for the Selective Service Act. And when Wallace went to jail, he became very bitter. I read with my own eyes the letter that the messenger wrote to Wallace when he was in jail, because Wallace was bitter. And the messenger told Wallace, he said, son, he said, I couldn't come to see you. He told him, I spent over $20,000 to try to keep you from going to jail. When other brothers were jumping in jail, they told the crack of hell, no, I ain't going in the army. You understand? Send me to jail. Them brothers went to jail, but the messenger tried to keep this son who didn't want to go from going to jail, but he ended up going anyway, and he became bitter. Wallace had always felt that he was the heir apparent. But Malcolm had gained so much national prestige, and what I'm telling you, you can check it out. I don't care how bitter you get. This is history. And you can't take history, and I'm giving it to you like it happened. And history is history. Wallace felt that Malcolm now was outshining him. And so what Wallace did, he crippled the best helper that the messenger had. So he eases up to Malcolm, and he tells Malcolm that the messenger has some other children other than by his mother, Sister Clara Muhammad. The messenger, in essence, has some more wives than the one wife. And so he feels that Malcolm, this would cripple Malcolm. So Malcolm knew this all the time. See? And when you say that Malcolm, you read his book, and he came into the knowledge of Wallace Muhammad, and he says in the autobiography that Wallace Muhammad told him this, but he didn't tell you when he told him. Look at it now. So, 1963 is an important year because it was actually the turning point for Malcolm's life. The year started off in February with him speaking on a Savior's Day, February the 26th, okay? The messenger is sick. We thought that perhaps he would die, but he rallied. The messenger came back. And so, during this year, October, I think, was the first speaking engagement that the messenger took that year in a place called Flint, Michigan. I went over this, I think, with the Muslims here before. The messenger, and some of the brothers here were there. The messenger went to Flint, Michigan. It was in a union hall. And the messenger was there speaking, and what happened, the place was full. We had a big crowd. Flint, Michigan. So there were some crackers that came, some police again, and they wanted to come in with their pistols. And Raymond Sharif went down to help the security brothers to deal with it. They refused to capitulate. They refused to give up their weapons so you can come in, because we used to always have a private section for white folks. But they refused, and they argued back and forth. Raymond Sharif tried to deal with it. He exhausted his ability to deal with them crackers. So the messenger's teaching now this whole auditorium of people. So Raymond Sharif has to come up and excuse himself and whisper to the messenger and tell the messenger what's happening. So the messenger and showing you the wisdom of God in his head, he tells the people what's happening. And he says, therefore, I'm dismissing this meeting. And dismissed the entire meeting. Just got started. The messenger left the rostrum, got in his car. Instead of flying back, he drove back to Chicago. Okay, Malcolm was in the car because when he got back to New York, he told us about what took place in the car. And if you get a Muhammad Speaks from October of 1963, you will open it and you will see a picture of the messenger, Malcolm, Philbrick, who was Malcolm's brother, and a few other, Theodore Hamza, the brother who was the brother's minister in Cleveland, Ohio. Okay, so there in his head, he tells the people what's happening. And he says, therefore, I'm dismissing this meeting. And dismissed the entire meeting. Just got started. The messenger left the rostrum, got in his car. Instead of flying back, he drove back to Chicago. Okay, Malcolm was in the car because when he got back to New York, he told us about what took place in the car. And if you get a Muhammad Speaks from October of 1963, you will open it and you will see a picture of the messenger, Malcolm, Philbrick, who was Malcolm's brother, and a few other, Theodore Hamza, the brother who was the brother's minister in Cleveland, Ohio. Okay, so therefore they were all standing in the paper. And so that from that day forward, the messenger said, no more whites in our public meeting. Okay, and he made, this was now October 1963. Now what happened in November 1963? November the 22nd, right? Okay. Now, there's little rumors going around in a few small publications that there's a power struggle in the nation. And the power struggle is between Raymond Sharif and Malcolm. Because the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is aging and ailing. Okay? And there's a power struggle. Raymond Sharif is over the mighty FOI. And Malcolm is the articulate, visible top lieutenant of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Okay? So these rumors are being leaked out in the paper. Okay, all over the country, these little rumors. Now, this is in October of '63. And these former Muslims that are sitting in here with me, some of you may not have known this yourself. But it's good that you know it, because right now, many of us are not with Brother Farrakhan in this work of rebuilding the nation, because you have preconceived ideas of what you think went down, but you really don't know what went down. Okay? Now, what I'm telling you, I'm giving you these dates so you can go back and document it, and then go talk to those that say they know. Okay? So, okay, New York, we are preparing for the messenger. He just spoke in Flint. Now the messenger's back, his health is coming back. And the messenger's getting ready to sweep the country again. So we set a date, December the 1st, 1963, at a place called Manhattan Center in New York. We got our posters out. We were campaigning, okay? The hall would only hold about 8,000 people. So Malcolm was going to, and he was good for this, he was going to be innovative, he was going to show it on closed circuit in Harlem. We were going to jam the place and then show it in Harlem for the overflow crowd that we couldn't get downtown. Manhattan Center is on 34th Street, 8th Avenue in New York. So we rent the place, got a contract with the devil, we advertise it all over the city, and if you get some old Muhammad Speaks from that month of November of 1963, you can see the advertisements that we had all over the city that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was coming. So Kennedy is killed. Okay? I remember the day, and those Muslims who are here, brothers and sisters old enough, some of you remember what you were doing when the announcement came on. I was cutting a piece of meat when the announcement came on. And I tell you the truth, I mumbled under my breath and all praise is due to Allah. And that's the way I felt about it. You know, I wasn't shedding no tears over another cracker. You understand? And I knew that what they had been doing to the black man, Lumumba was killed, and behind it was the CIA and Kennedy and his brother. Look, so the country is upset. The messenger tells the ministers, and he tells Malcolm, and Malcolm called a meeting. I know we went to a meeting. I was in the ministry class. Malcolm said that the messenger said, do not have anything to say about the death of John Kennedy. Don't mention it. That was the instruction. Brothers, you could bear me witness, the instructions went all over the country. That was the messenger's instruction. Okay, so Malcolm had to go to Chicago because we had this December the 1st date. The messenger said cancel. Then Malcolm comes back and he tells the messenger of Falls and how this took place, but I wasn't privy to that. But said that the man don't want to give us our money back. And Malcolm said that he could carry it. The messenger said he'd rather him cancel. And remember, when you're dealing with a divine man, that's right. his wish, like he said, brother, if I was you, I would do it this way. And he said, no, the apostle, I think I'm going to do it this way. Brother, you out of order. You don't even know what you're talking about now, because his suggestion is your command. You understand? If he make a suggestion to you, you say, yes, sir, dear Holy Apostle, your suggestion is what I want to do. Your suggestion to me is a command. It's not a suggestion. So Malcolm was kind of pushy this way. So Malcolm said he could carry it, because the beast didn't want to give us our refund. So the messenger said, okay, gave him permission because he wanted to do it. So I remember this day, and I think I went over this with the Muslims here a few Sundays ago, maybe a couple of months ago. I was on security that day. I went to Malcolm's house to pick him up. He drove in his car, the same blue Oldsmobile that they found when he was killed, and he had Harriet Muhammad, who was married to the messenger's youngest son, Akbar Muhammad. And he had Harriet Muhammad, who was married to the messenger's youngest son, Akbar Muhammad. She had just got back from Cairo because her son Akbar had fallen out. Akbar ended up marrying an Egyptian girl. So Harriet was in the car with Malcolm, and he sat in the back, which is proper for a Muslim to do, and he drove in the front. And me and a brother named John D., we drove right downtown behind him, and all the way Malcolm was teaching Harriet on something. I could imagine what it was because of the thing that had just taken place with Akbar. So we get to the hall, and the brothers who were with me and soldiered, if they're still alive, they can witness exactly what happened. Malcolm gets out of the car in the garage, parked next to the center. We walk to the front door. A lieutenant named Clarence meets us at the door. They know him as Hussein Shabazz. He's the imam in Newark, New Jersey now. Hussein Shabazz says to Malcolm that we had one devil came. He was a reporter from the New York Times, and we just sent him away. His name is Hannah. He's mentioned in the book called The Death and Life of Malcolm by Peter Goldman over and over again. Hannah was the man at the Times that Malcolm used in order to get certain articles in that I'm going to mention in a minute, okay? Brother, you got to keep me up on the time. I'm going to try to finish this in the next 10 minutes. We'll have to do a part 3, okay? So Malcolm tells Brother Clarence, said, he asked the brother, where is he? I'm standing right behind him. Said, we just send him on the block. He says, go get him. So the brother goes and gets him back. Malcolm goes inside. He goes back to the stage to come upstairs, and then we take a seat in the audience. Clarence goes, gets the New York Times reporter. Now remember, obedience is better than sacrifice. The messenger had just said in October, no more devils in our meeting. Since that incident in front. But Malcolm got this man from the New York Times showing you two things. He was disobeying the Honorable Elijah Muhammad because maybe he thought he knew better. Malcolm felt that publicity in the press would help to heighten the consciousness of our people about our movement. He believed that, okay? But he didn't see the snare in it, the trap that the devil had. So therefore, they were saying that he thought he knew better than the messenger, okay? And then it was just disobedience. So Malcolm goes up, he teaches a beautiful lecture. I can't even remember what he taught, but it was dynamite because I know the crowd was clapping and applauding. And right at the end, Malcolm opens up for questions, which was the wrong thing to do, number one, because it was a very tense time in the country. Kennedy was loved. The youngest president, he came into office at 43, I think it was. He was a Catholic, and he was the flyest Boston, Harvard graduate. You understand? Him and his young brothers, brilliant. You know, he was loved by the American white public. So Malcolm opens up for questioning, and as I told the believers, I can see the man's face this very day, had a black leather jacket on, recedingly bald, looked like he may have been 34, 35 years old, said, would you comment on the death of President Kennedy? And Malcolm took off and talked about chickens coming home to roost. Never made me sad, always made me glad. You understand? And then the crowd just broke out, and the devil handler said over there and he wrote. The next day, the New York Times that goes around the world had a column in it, Malcolm X on President Kennedy, chickens coming home to roost. And then had a little article, how many people were there and so forth, and what Malcolm said. So quite naturally, this was disobedience again to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And the disobedience, the messenger said for us to say nothing about the death of President Kennedy. Now Malcolm could skate on it, so I didn't say anything about Kennedy. I just said that chickens coming home to roost never made me sad, always made me glad. Now what he said may have been the truth because the chickens were coming home to roost for America. You understand? She had been bloodletting around the world, taking governments in and out and killing its leaders. But he was disobeying the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So when the Times came out with that, and it was published, put on radio and everything, I know the FBI field office had a field day on that statement. And so therefore it made everybody look down on the Muslim, because Malcolm had been described in the press as Muslim leader Malcolm X. And so therefore the messenger had no choice but to come out and make a public denunciation of Malcolm's statement by saying that, and the devil made mockery of it, all on the radios in New York in particular, Mr. X has been X. You understand? Showing, and they made the statement that Elijah Muhammad, head of the black Muslim movement, has just X'd Malcolm X for making a public statement on Kennedy's death. But the messenger was saving the life of the entire nation. Some nationalists I've heard when they lecture saying that because Malcolm had the strength to say it, the messenger didn't want to back him up. No, the messenger's no fool. It's the messenger of Allah. The messenger had a whole nation to preserve. Brothers in prisons across the country. We out there on the corner selling our Muhammad speech. You understand? Black people who were with us turned against us because of their love of those crackers. They love Kennedy, blacks and whites together. That's why you go in barbershops today and you see Martin Luther King sandwiched in between two crackers, John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy. You understand? In a black barbershop. So showing you how black people love that Kennedy family, and what it did, it was turn them off by Malcolm's statement, so the messenger was preserving the nation. So the messenger set Malcolm down for 90 days. 90 days. And so during this time, now the rumors come up strong in the paper. During this time, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had Brother Farrakhan to come in, who was really like an understudy of Malcolm. All of the films that you see of Malcolm speaking at public rallies, if you look sitting behind him, you see Brother Louis Farrakhan sitting right there, okay? And so, quite naturally, he was the strongest voice in that area of the country, the northeast corner, and he was in Boston. And so, Brother Louis X, as he was called at that time, Minister Louis X, was brought down to teach in New York. His last conversation with Malcolm, I believe it was in December or January of 1964, when Malcolm told him, and you've heard Minister Farrakhan mention it, that I wish it was you being an example for me instead of me being an example for you. My enemies will one day be your enemies. I don't know how prophetic Malcolm knew his words were, but they were prophetic words. So then Malcolm would sit down, and I remember how Malcolm, we had a debate at a church in the young ministers class. I was a part of the class. Malcolm wouldn't go into church. We were outside, and he gave us our points and how to deal in a debate and so forth. But to me, he was a real soldier because he was being obedient to his leading teacher. He said, if I go in there, maybe somebody from the press, or, they may start taking pictures. He said he didn't want to do it. So he wouldn't make no thing. He would come to the temple. He would stay in the back office, and as we had visited ministers teaching, and he would pick up his mail. But to me, he was an example of a soldier until Ali was getting ready to fight. Now we're into February of 1964. I'm going to make this the last point, and we'll continue. 1964. Malcolm gets 90 days, so his time is not really up until the end of February. Okay? About the end of February, because the messenger gave him the time December the 3rd or 4th. So 90 days would be right at the end of the February, the first part of March. So 1964, Cassius Clay, who's an upcoming boxer, he's getting ready to box Sonny Liston. Malcolm is not teaching. All kind of rumors are flying around in the paper about a power struggle. And what the press is doing is they're building up sympathy for Malcolm and resentment against the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, showing Malcolm as the real hero, and he's been silenced, and such a golden voice at a time that we're in the height of our struggle should not be silenced, but he should be heard from. There were black groups who were encouraging Malcolm. And I met a brother who was a professor at a college who told me that a group of the brothers in San Francisco had sent Malcolm a letter and a ticket inviting him to San Francisco, showing him that he should go ahead and leave the nation and that they would be behind him if he go on and form his own movement. And those are the same kind of black people that knew that the messenger had a tangible, solid program, but they couldn't deal with the discipline of the Nation of Islam. And they used it under the guise that, I don't agree with your religion. You just don't agree with living right because you don't think you got the strength to back away from the filth of the white man's world, okay? So, 1964, February, the fight is getting ready to take place. Anybody know? I think it was the 19th of February. So what Ali does, he's Cassius Clay. You remember how the picture was such a poor example of what really happened. But he was getting ready to fight. They told him they heard he was these black Muslims in his camp and so forth, and they would call the fight off. And he had enough strength to say, call it off, and then they called it on. But meanwhile, Cassius invited Malcolm, Betty, and the children down to the camp and it was a way for him to cool out. And we all looked at that as beautiful. He had been working so hard, the messenger could take the heat off him, and he could go down to the camp. So he stayed down there. He played a low profile. His wife and his children were down there. The night of the fight, Brother Cassius gets the victory over Liston, and the next day Malcolm leaves his family there, and he flies back to New York. How many were in the communications workshop Savior's Day? Anybody here was in the communications? One brother, two brothers. Remember a brother named Mel Good, okay? Mel Good, who was a part of our Savior's Day program, he was working for NBC, I believe it was, in New York. So showing you how the devil was keeping tabs on Malcolm, they knew what plane he was coming in on. So they sent Mel Good out there with a camera and a microphone. And when Malcolm stepped off the plane, Mel Good was right there. Well, Mr. X, what do you think of Cassius Clay? He really, it was an upset victory. What do you have to say? Then Malcolm went on to make just a general statement about the clean living that he does as a follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and so forth, and he won the championship, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back, because that was disobedience the third time to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The messenger said for him not to make no public statement. So therefore, Malcolm made the public statement. That weekend, the messenger sent James Shabazz from Newark, New Jersey, who is dead now. Some maniac shot him, and sent him over to New York to announce that Malcolm was being removed from his post as minister of Temple No. 7 in New York City. And that night, I remember how Betty was sitting over there, and James Shabazz was explaining the whole thing, how the messenger had called him out to Phoenix and told him, Brother Malcolm, you started a lot of fires. Go home and put them out. And Malcolm didn't come back and put him back. And James Shabazz is going over all of this with the believers, and Betty is sitting there shaking her head, no, no, no. And so he said that the messenger had set him down, relieved him of his post as minister of Temple No. 7. So what happens next is this is the end of February. Savior's Day is coming up. Savior's Day is coming up, and this is when Minister Farrakhan delivered his favorite speech, Are You Ready for Muhammad? William J. and other brothers that were there. I mean, he brought the messenger. That's when the messenger said that I didn't know that I had such balls of fire. And so, but the papers on the East Coast were saying Malcolm X barred from Savior's Day. See, the devil has started working. Malcolm X barred from Savior's Day. Check it now. When the messenger told him he could come, but he just wasn't on no post as no minister. Ministers have gotten busted in the nation since we started. You understand? But he was a very visible minister, so the papers now was whipping it up. So we had a successful Savior's Day. Then, on March the 8th, and you can get the New York Times and read it, 1964, Malcolm made his declaration of independence from the Nation of Islam. And he had a press conference at the Hilton, downtown New York. And at the press conference, Malcolm issued a statement, and those who want to read it, go get it and read it for yourself. Malcolm said, I'm leaving the Nation of Islam. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad is still my leading teacher, but I think I can help him better outside of the nation than inside of the nation, okay? And he made the public statement and sent a letter to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and Malcolm was cutting himself off from the Nation of Islam, said he was going to form a black nationalist political party. But what Malcolm did, in essence, after he got out there, he went right in accord with what the Holy Quran said that they would do. I'm going to read this and close it out, and we'll continue the next time. If you get your Holy Quran and turn to the 9th chapter called The Immunity, okay, it's a chapter that deals the heaviest with the hypocrites, and you turn to verse 107, I believe it is. I just want to read it, bear with me. When Malcolm left the nation, then it's publicized all over the country, New York Times and everything. Now, right at this time, the Muslim world was going through this kind of crisis. Saudi Arabia had lost King Abdulaziz in 53, and a son named Saad came in, Saad ibn Abdulaziz. Saad he messed up everything. He was the one that was living lavishly and messed up everything, and he had turned a lot of his family members against him. And they had begun to side with Abdel Nasser in Egypt. And this spirit of nationalism was moving through the Muslim world. And the Saudis had some concern with Islamic movements all over the world, but they considered us unorthodox because we believed that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was the messenger of God. So when Malcolm made this break, immediately the Saudis, with their money that they were really beginning to accumulate in the early 60s, made an immediate pitch for Malcolm to bring him into what they call Orthodox Islam and use him hoping that he could bring all of the black people into the old world type of Islam, and they would finance a backing. Now, all of this was working in the background with the aid of the United States government that had Saudi Arabia in its hip pocket. Okay, so when Malcolm gets out there, first thing he wants to do is try to build a movement, and about 70 brothers from the New York Temple left with him, okay? We had well over 400 troops, so we didn't really miss the 70 that bad, okay? That's 400 that was active, and we had another 1,000 that were in the street. So what happened was when he got out there, he first thought that he would build a mosque, so they started the Muslim Mosque Incorporated. And look what the Holy Quran says in the 9th chapter. We had to go all the way. So when Malcolm crossed over his Rubicon, he wanted to get back, but he really couldn't get back. He couldn't get himself back. And in the last days, as Gil Noble, a reporter from New York, made available a tape that evidently Betty made available to him, Malcolm had made a tape to send to the messenger to ask the messenger to accept him back in the nation. So this is a part of history that you have to know so that you will see, because the nation is going to become strong again. And there may be something holding you back from coming into the nation, and it may be the seed of Malcolm rolling around in the base of your brain that you really don't understand, but you feel that you love Malcolm, and the Muslims had something to do with his death, or Brother Malcolm, as brilliant as he is, why did he leave the nation? It must be something wrong there. See, that's the seed that the enemy wants to roll around in your brain. You love the nation. You hear Brother Farrakhan preaching it. You know it's right, but the seed in your brain, Malcolm was brilliant. I love Malcolm. I respect him, and he backed off the nation. There must be a reason why. So therefore, it holds you in the limbo, and you become the fence straggler. You make a decision to go in no direction. And that's where the enemy wants to keep us. So I hope you understand. So I was saying that the kind of lecture that this is, I know it's not one of them ball and fire lectures, but it's a historical analysis of the nation that you need in order to take this next step with Brother Farrakhan. Okay, so next Wednesday night we meet here. Again, make sure you come out. Bring someone with you every Sunday, 6401 South Sangamon United Methodist Church at 3 p.m. Brother Farrakhan will be there if you will of Allah this Sunday. Make sure you come out and bring a guest with you. Also, you can get the Messenger's publications on sale in the back. And that speech I was telling you about that the Messenger made in Flint, Michigan is in Message to the Black Man. Okay? You can find it in Message to the Black Man, what the Messenger said at that time about letting devils into our meeting. Minister Farrakhan can be heard every Saturday on the WBEE. It's 1570 on your AM dial. Make sure you tune in. It's Saturday, 8 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. in the morning. We have baked goods on sale, bean pies and cold drinks on sale on your way out. And also, they don't have a tape available of these lectures, but those that ordered the part one of this, perhaps next week we can have the tapes either Sunday at the meeting. I'll try to make arrangements with the secretary. Okay, if there's no further announcement, we'd like to take up a public collection. The book, The Hog, is on sale. Also, we got a new supply in, so it's on sale on your way out. If the brothers and sisters come forward, we'd like for you to give us a donation. If you have it to give, thank you. If you don't, may Allah bless you to get it.
For more information on the life-giving teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and to continue making these lectures possible, you may write us for a free catalog at MEMPS at 5025 North Central Avenue, number 415, Phoenix, Arizona, 85012. Or you may visit us on the web for a free updated complete listing at MEMPS.com. That's MEMPS.com.